Hey and welcome, my name is Johannes. This channel is called the Uhren Dantler. Thanks for stopping by, and today we're gonna restore a watch and I'm so excited. You see it, it's a Rolex and it's my own Rolex. I bought this watch a few weeks ago, not too far away from where I am living, and I found it on eBay and I was so stoked about this watch. I think it's beautiful. But you can already see, it's not, how should I say, new. It's worn, but it's not worn by the owner from which I bought the watch, because he bought the watch 5 years ago or anything like that, and he said to me he didn't wear it once. So I was a bit confused because it's such a beautiful watch, and as you can see, the booklet and the box is also included. And it's a beautiful watch, and I think it has to be worn. But the owner said to me he does not know how accurate the watch is. He know it's running and it's all fine, and I was like, okay, I don't care. I will buy it. And in my mind, I already knew, okay, possibly there is a service necessary, and we're gonna check now what kind or if a service is necessary. And oh boy, yeah, for a Rolex, these values are not good. I mean, the rate, it varies a bit, but the amplitude, 170 degrees, is pretty low. So this is not what a Rolex is meant to be, because Rolex are making fantastic watches. I like them. I always liked them, but since I was starting on this hobby, watchmaking, I even like them more because Rolex movements, they are one of a kind. They're so good, and it really makes fun to work on them. So if you, and I would highly recommend you, if you're starting watchmaking, I'm pretty sure you will love Rolex too. So these are simply fantastic built watches. They are meant to endure for long times, and yeah, what I really like, you can give the watches to your kids or to whoever. They are meant to build for to last for 100 years or anything like that. So this is great. And yeah, you can see this watch is slightly older than me right now. And it will always be. Um, and I really like that thought, having something on my arm which is older than me and is still in perfect condition. What you cannot say about me, but that's another topic, right? So yeah, let's see. For Rolex, you need a special device to open the case. It got those special case backs, and you need those special openers. Um, and it's always recommended to use such a case back opening tool. A rubber ball is in most cases not enough for a Rolex because they are watertight and they are closed really tight. So, yeah, this is necessary in most cases to use the big guns. And now we're gonna have our first look at the movement, and yeah, I'm so stoked. Yeah, you can see on the back there are already two watchmaker marks. So I mean, this watch is nearly 40 years old. Two services in 40 years. It's not that much. I know there are watches which are serviced not that often and are older, but I think all every 5 to 10 years a watch should be serviced, a mechanical watch. In this case, this is not what it's supposed to be for this watch. So first is we have to take out the movement, and Rolex has this special movement holding system. There are screws which you have to screw down so you can turn the movement, and after turning like this, you simply have to look that the screws are in the grooves, and then turn your watch upside down or downside up, I don't know. And you can lift the case. And here you can already see the crystal in the case is pretty damaged, but this is a topic for later on. Now we are enjoying this beautiful dial. I know it's a 36 millimeters watch. For many men, this is too small for a watch, but as a dress watch, I like it. I like it if it's not too big, and this is perfect. And the white dial also makes the appearance of the watch bigger, in my opinion. So a watch with a white dial always looks bigger than with a black dial, in my opinion. I don't know. I don't know if you see it like that, but yeah, that's my experience. So now we're gonna remove the dial. There are those little screws at the side of the movement which are tightened onto the dial feet, and if you loosen them, you can simply lift the dial. Now we have lifted it, you see? There are the feet, and the dial is in awesome condition, and I make sure that it stays in this condition in this little box where it stays safe, no scratches, no dents or anything like that, and we can go on. First, we're gonna remove the automatic part of the movement. This part is, in my opinion, it's really smart because at the beginning of mechanical watches, you always had to hand wind your watch so it keeps on running. But with the invention of the automatic works, it is possible that this rotor is moving when you're moving your arm, and the moving of this rotor keeps your mainspring winded. And this is something which is really good, because you're wearing your watch on the day, and when you go to bed you take off your watch, and it will run through the night, and when you take it on in the morning, it will wind itself over the day. So this is pretty simple. So now we're gonna take off the date disc. Rolex is famous for its instantaneous date change, but later we will see it, I guess. This is something I like. So when the date changes at a Rolex, it changes not over, let's say, 30 minutes. It changes from 1 second to the other. And this is something which you will see in the later process of this restoration. And you will also see why this instantaneous change in Rolex is possible. Part of it you can already see here. Beneath this wheel, this is the date indicator wheel. It's screwed by a reverse threaded screw, so always keep in mind, not lefty loosey, righty tighty, or what is it? No, it's the other way. And now we're taking off the date indicator wheel, and below you can see there is a spring, and this spring is the date indicator spring, and it's the strongest spring I have ever seen in a watch. And there is also a little jewel here, and this jewel is for the sake of minimal friction when the date changes. And this spring, it's so strong, really. Oh, if you lose that spring, I don't know if it stays in the same country or if it directly flees. I don't know where. I must say, springs and I, in watchmaking, it's a special relationship. Or let's say they don't like me. I think this is the truth. So if you start working on watches and you're losing springs, don't worry. I bet I have lost more springs than you will ever. Yeah. So now we're letting the wind out of the mainspring. by releasing the click, because if there's no wind in the mainspring, the balance stops spinning and we can remove the balance. It's always a good idea to remove the balance as early as possible in the process, because the balance is the most delicate part on the watch, and yeah, make sure that you don't damage it, especially in those Rolex movements. If you damage a mainspring, not a mainspring, a balance spring or the balance in general, it's always really expensive. I mean, all of you know Rolexes are expensive, and so are spare parts. Now we are gonna remove the ratchet wheel. Here, ratchet wheel is the connection from the mainspring barrel to the winding mechanism, but you will see it later. The winding mechanism is on the other side of the movement. This is the ratchet wheel spring. This spring is therefore that the click will stop the ratchet wheel or the mainspring from unwinding. That's all it is. Now we're removing the pallet fork and the bridge of the gear train. And as you already can see, there is a wheel stuck onto the bridge, which is always a sign that there is old oil in there which already dried or is sticky or anything like that, and it's always an indicator for it's a good time to service the watch, right? So now we're removing all the wheels. The function of the wheels is simply convert the spinning of the mainspring barrel, which is really slow, to the escape wheel, which is spinning really fast. This is most of the function of it. There are other functions, but to keep it as simple as possible, this is it. This is the mainspring bridge. So it's called mainspring bridge because the mainspring barrel is located beneath it. And we already finished taking apart this side of the movement. And now we're gonna work on the keyless works. You can see this part is for quick setting the date. And it's also really sticky. There is some kind of oil under it and it was really hard to remove it. This is the setting lever spring. Again, a wheel is sticking onto it. So yeah, I think it's time for service. I think you already have seen it or you've gotten my point in here. So good time to service the watch. This is the yoke spring. Also a spring which is very likely to get somewhere but not into your tweezers. It's the yoke spring also likes to go on journey. Yeah. The golden part here is the second hand. The second hand is or the second's hack, sorry, not the second hand, the second's hack. The second's hack is the feature. If you pull out your crown for setting the time, the watch will stop running, which was an invention early back in the days. And it was mostly used to synchronize watches. You know, everybody could stop their watch from running and you could exactly synchronize all watches, which was a pretty handy feature. And most of modern watches have these features right now. And I really like it, to be honest. Finally, after getting the dial side disassembled, we are gonna disassemble the automatic part of this watch. And you already see it. Rolex has those famous two purple or red wheels, which are the reversing wheels. And yeah, every Rolex is famous for it, so I like it. The color is really special. It's hard to describe, and I think the camera don't quite get the color of these wheels, but they are beautiful. as the whole watch is. And yeah, you already can see these wheels are also stuck. Yeah, and there's some kind of debris on the other side of the automatic bridge. Oh, yeah, I don't know. I think it's good to clean it, give it a good clean. And by the way, we'll not only clean the movement, we will also restore the case, the crystal, and the bracelet. We'll give it a complete overhaul. I know it's a vintage watch, and vintage watches, you have two options. Leave it like it is because you love the I call it scars and the patina and all those stuff. I totally understand if you do that, if it's your own watch, because every little mark, dent has its own story. But I bought this watch and I don't have stories to the way this watch looks. And so I decided, okay, I give it an overhaul, make the watch as clean as possible. And if I induce marks, scratches, and other stuff on the watch, I will leave it as it is because everything has its own story, right? So I hope you understand why I'm doing this. So I think it's a reasonable process. Now we're unwinding the mainspring, and you can do this by hand no matter what. I would always recommend you to wear finger gloves because it's not recommended to touch the mainsprings with your bare fingers because of sweat and salt. It can damage the mainspring. It does not have to, but it can. And the same is about the mainspring in the watch cleaning machine. So I always clean the mainspring by hand. I know some people just put it in their cleaning machine, and I think it's absolutely reasonable and okay, but I'm always a bit, frightened about damaging parts. And now we're putting everything in those little baskets, and the little baskets in bigger baskets, and those bigger baskets in one big basket. And afterwards, everything goes into not my cleaning machine, it goes into my ultrasonic cleaner because I have a 2-step cleaning process which I'm doing quite a time now. It worked pretty well for me. First of all, I'm putting the parts into an ultrasonic cleaner. I know some people only use the ultrasonic cleaner or only use the watch cleaning machine. Both ways are absolutely fine. I'm using this procedure, and for me it worked. And in watchmaking, it's always, if you have found something that works, just do it that way. Yeah. It's so funny because I know how long everything takes to find a way you're doing it. It's not like I'm starting this hobby and I know exactly what I have to do. No, it's like you're starting and you ask 10 people and 10 people have 20 different opinions about everything. And you're like, okay, what should I do now? And so if you really start this hobby or if you're practicing this hobby, don't get bothered about other opinions. They might be also right, and you can be right. There are more than one way it works, right? So some parts are getting special treatment, like the balance and the pallet fork. The pallet fork is glued in by something called shellac, and using the solvent in my watch cleaning machine, I'm always afraid that the shellac will dissolve and the pallet fork is not usable anymore, or you have to re-glue it. And I've never done that. Maybe it will come in the future, but in my opinion, this is something which is really complicated. So after cleaning everything, we will epilamize some parts, the reversing wheel, the escape wheel here, and the pallet fork. These are the parts I'm epilamizing. Epilamizing is simply about keeping the oil where you're putting it. So if the part has some epilam on it, the oil is less likely to spread on that surface. So now the whole part is epilamized, and we are removing the epilam on the pivots, which you can see here by using pithwood. And so the pinions have no epilam on them or on it. and therefore the oil should stay on the pivot. Yeah, that's the whole secret about it. The pallet fork gets also cleaned at the end where the balance interacts here with the pallet fork, and that's the whole secret of epilamizing. What I have seen in the past, if I'm epilamizing, the watches are more endurable in terms of serviceability, so they don't need a service as often as if I don't epilamize them, but that's just my experience. Now we're starting our way back into the movement by getting back the mainspring in the mainspring barrel. Therefore, we're using these fancy mainspring winders, which are, by the way, hella expensive. So maybe one of the expensive parts in watchmaking by terms of size and weight. And yeah, you simply wind the mainspring into your mainspring winder. Be really gentle with it. And again, I know it looks easy, and I know other videos using those mainspring winders always looks like, oh, this is pretty easy. I think the first 3 to 5 mainsprings I tried to wind in, I destroyed. Because you have some kind of learning curve, right? And this learning curve, yeah, I think everybody needs to go through this. I'm always showing you the greases and the oils. The reddish oil is HP 1300 for your information. And I'm using some braking grease on the walls of the mainspring barrel. So the, wait for it. Nice sound. And the braking grease is therefore because it's an automatic watch, and if you're wearing the watch, it will always wind itself. And so the mainspring has to have the ability to slip through if it's fully winded. Otherwise, you would damage the mainspring, and therefore you need to put some braking grease on the sides of the barrel so you have the right amount of friction or non-friction. That's the whole secret. Now we're putting back the mainspring arbor and put the lid on it and close it by using our little tool. Again, satisfying click here. Wait for it. I don't know if you could hear it. But yeah, it's also very, very satisfying. So first step is done. The mainspring is in the mainspring barrel. And now we're preparing the rest of the movement. For example, the gear train bridge here. There is an capstone on the escape wheel. And this one is also something which has to be oiled in a special way. And before oiling it, I'm giving it an additional clean. I mean, right, it was in the cleaning machine, so it should be clean, but yeah. You don't make it worse if you clean it one more time. And as you can see here, it's shiny and clean. Now put it back into the bridge. You could put it back into the bridge with oil on it, or there is a separate way by using these automatic oilers, which are new, by the way. And you simply put your automatic oilers on the hole in the jewel, and then pull the needle back, oil gets into the jewel, and you have the perfect amount of jewel in your or on your capstone. This is pretty easy, and I like it this way. It's much more easy than oiling the capstone and then turn it with your tweezers and getting it back into the bridge, because those capstones, they are so small and so tiny. You know, if you're touching your tweezer in a wrong way, the capstone will most likely fly away, and it's really hard to find them. I mean, there are several options like UV light and all those stuff I've seen online, but it's always better to not lose them. And now we're getting everything back. This is the click spring. I already told you. The click spring is called click spring because it interacts with the click. We have to get it back in. Yes. I'm always securing it with a second stick. Now we are oiling the point where the post where the click is positioned, and this is the click. And the click is interacting with the ratchet wheel, and the ratchet wheel sits on top of the mainspring barrel. So if you're turning your ratchet wheel, the mainspring barrel below wants to turn. And because the ratchet wheel cannot turn because of the click in one direction, the mainspring barrel has to turn. This is the whole process where you get the energy in your movement. Here you can see you can turn the ratchet wheel into one direction, but the other one or the other direction is not possible because of the click. And it's also called the click because if you're winding your watch, these characteristic click sounds are made by the click. Yeah, it's as easy as it sounds, right? And these are just some transmission gears from the ratchet wheel to the winding mechanism on the dial side. Always keep in mind oiling it. You know, I also have an automatic oiler for HP 1300, and yeah, it's pretty handy. Those automatic oilers I'm using for, I don't know, a month or two up to now, and I must say it's good because if you're oiling it with oilers, I personally always tend to use too much oil. Some comments in the past already said that, and I'm totally open to that, and you're right. And by using those automatic oilers, it's much easier to always use the same amount of oil. It's not necessary. You can also do it with oilers, but those automatic oilers, they're simply making life a bit easier. Not that much, but a little bit, right? So now we're on the dial side. This is the clutch and the clutch wheel. Therefore, we're using our blue grease. This is not a kind of oil, it's blue grease, and it's for areas or parts of the watch where heavy friction is. And for example, the clutch and the clutch wheel, there is no high speed. It's more like of a high pressure contact, and therefore it's recommended to use the blue grease. Also, I'm using it for the winding stem, getting it back into the watch, and this makes sense, yes. So, now we're on the dial side, as already mentioned. Always make sure to oil and grease all parts and be sure everything works. And by the way, I can tell you when I bought this watch, the whole situation was a bit strange because I already told you I bought the watch not too far away from where I am living, and I met this guy in a really, really dark street. It was like, okay, I'm a bit afraid. What happens here? I mean, he was such a nice guy, and there was no doubt about it that I'm in any danger or anything like that. But I was thinking to myself, okay, I have, let's say, a bit money with me because Rolexes are not too cheap, and I don't know what his plans are now, but everything went in a good way, so no reason for that. And I was laughing to myself if I'm sometimes a bit too paranoid or whatever you would call it. I don't know if you know those situations. Sometimes you just have to laugh about yourself, right? And I think I can laugh about myself pretty often. Maybe more often than I would like to. But no matter what, we're placing back the setting lever and the setting lever spring. And this one, you don't have to screw it all the way down, just go halfway and then put the setting lever spring into the right position, put a bit grease on it, and then you can tighten it down. And now we will see what the setting lever spring is doing. It has different positions, as you can hear, for different functions of the work. Winding, setting the date, setting the time. And there are also other options. Psychos sometimes have those option. If you're pushing the stem into, you change the date, which is also an awesome feature. It does not work for many older watches, but I think it's a really cool feature. Now we're getting back the hour wheel and the bridge for the hour wheel. Make sure everything is oiled properly. In terms of oiling, it's a bit like always in watchmaking, what I already told you. If you're talking to different watchmakers, they will recommend you different strategies of oiling. For me, in most of the ways, I have 3 different oils. It's Möbius 9010, Möbius HP 1300, and the blue grease. And for fast spinning wheels like the balance and the escape wheel, I'm using the light oil, which is Möbius 9010. And for wheels which are turning at a decent speed and the pressure is not too high, I'm using Möbius HP 1300. And for the high pressure contacts, I'm using the blue grease. So now you can see I positioned the bridge, and as in most cases, the pinion of the escape wheel is not aligned, and sometimes or mostly I do this under the microscope, as you can see here. And do you see it? It went right into the correct position and the wheels started turning. So this is something, if you see these videos, you think the assembly of a watch movement is pretty straightforward. And if you're experienced, it can be, but sometimes positioning those bridges and aligning all the pinions is something which can take, it can take you several minutes, maybe even an hour if you have a bad day, right? Now here we're also using my automatic oiler. Just position it on the pinion and pushing it down, we get the right amount of oil on each pinion. Now we're getting back the pallet fork on this watch. The pallet fork is the part which stops the gear train from spinning until the mainspring is unwinded. And the pallet fork always is some kind of part of the watch which describes how much energy is getting released over time. So each tick the escape wheel can spin, and these ticks are given free by the pallet fork and the pallet fork or the balance wheel. I mean, the pallet fork and the balance wheel are connected, so both can do this, or both are responsible for this. Now we're already finished and we can get back the balance into the watch, and the watch was running, so I expect this watch to run, and hopefully better than before. And this is always a great feeling if you're able to get the watch running. And no, come on, no, little push maybe, no, okay, give it a little spin and the watch starts running. Looks good, not too bad. I think that's okay. What we have to do now is oil the capstones of the balance. It's pretty much the same. Oh no. Whew, I was lucky. Have you seen the capstone of the balance and the jewel? They flew away. So this happens sometimes. So yeah, you always have to work with as little pressure as possible. This makes it easier because parts don't fly too far away. This is just my experience again. And now we're putting some, maybe it's 9010 on the end stone of the balance. jewel. Putting it back together and replacing it in the balance. We're doing the same on the other side of the balance. It's pretty much straightforward. Just closing the shock spring. The shock spring is just a simple method, so if your watch drops, the pinion of the balance does not break. And here we're just applying some oil on the end of the pellet stones, and now we can see if our service was successful or if we have to work again or do it again, I don't know. And yeah, the trace is good. It's a really good signal, but the amplitude 240 degrees I don't like, so I decided to take the whole watch apart again and using a new mainspring, because I reused the old mainspring, and sometimes mainsprings lose power over time. So in this case, I thought to myself, okay, let's give it a new mainspring. You know, the mainspring is, I don't know, $20 or anything like that. It's not that expensive in comparison to the watch. And I'm just placing the mainspring into the barrel. Those mainspring come in those holders, and you just position them on the barrel, fixing them with your fingers and pressing them down. You know, fixing the ring with your fingers makes the whole process so much easier. Before I was doing that, positioning mainsprings into the barrel was, how should I say, not always that successful. And what I'm not showing you here is putting a new mainspring into it had me to repeat the whole process: cleaning, assembling, oiling. I'm just fast forwarding here through a bit. So this is something which is really costs much time. And afterwards I've seen, okay, the amplitude is a bit higher, but 250 for a Rolex is not too good. And so I decided to use those little polishing sticks on the ends of the balance wheel. You know, the channel Watch Repair Tutorial is a great channel, and I can recommend it to you because Alex from the Watch Repair Tutorial channel is talking about those polishing sticks, and I was seeing it and I was like, okay, I should do that by myself too, because the pivots of the balance are sometimes not that clean, or they are oxidated if the watch is not worn on a regular basis. And this watch was laying in a drawer for 5 years or anything like that, so it's highly likely. And if you have a look at the pivot here, it does not look really clean, right? And now we're gonna use the polishing stick on the other side. You have to disassemble, or you have to take the balance wheel of the balance cock. So this is something which is really delicate, and sometimes you are afraid of it because the balance spring is the most delicate part in the watch, and therefore you always have to be a bit gentle. And now you can see after polishing, the pivot really looks clean, and both pivots here, they look like new, and this is what it has to look like. And I hope this will increase the amplitude of the watch a bit. I know you could say, the signal of the watch is good, and 250 degrees of amplitude is also good, but you know, it's a Rolex, and for Rolex there are some kind of service regularities, and they say after a service, the amplitude of a fully wound Rolex has to be between 250 to 300. And 250 was on the lower end. And I at least wanted to get somewhere in the middle of this range. And therefore, I decided to go the whole way. And therefore, I polished it, and we're gonna see me inserting the balance wheel once again, just because it's so satisfying, right? And yes, the balance immediately starts running, which it didn't in the first try. So this is a good sign, right? And now all we have to do is to check if the balance spring is on the right height, which is not the case in this way. So I'm just releasing the screw for the balance spring a little bit and pushing the holder down until it's flush with the balance cock. And now you can see it looks good. Everything is fine. And now we can have a look at the amplitude. And you can see we are above 270, and the amplitude should increase a little bit because a new serviced and epilamized watch is increasing its amplitude by a little bit over the first week or the first days. This is something which is also which I have seen only since I'm epilamizing the parts. Without epilamizing, I haven't seen this, but epilamizing the parts is always something which needs time to get the epilam on all pivots away, or which it needs time that the epilam is taken or worn off of the pivots, and if it's completely worn off, it runs a little bit better. Yeah, in this case, everything was a success, and now we're on the dial side. We are positioning these gigantic spring for the date indicator. This is so strong, and I was so afraid. Luckily, it did not fly away. Just using some grease because this is a high friction point. The spring is so strong, so much pressure, and if you have too much oil, just remove it by using a little bit of Rodico. Placing back the jewel for the date indicator, which is awesome. I mean, I have not worked on that many luxury brands, but the jewel on the date indicator is something which I only know from Rolex, and it's awesome. And I like this instant date change. This is something which is awesome, and I like it. And now you can see it if we are setting the time and the date indicator spins. Look at it. Zack. This is the part where the date changed, and this is awesome. Now we can place the dial holder ring and the lever for the date wheel. We are also using light oil, maybe as 9010 on the jewels where the date wheel will rub against. Again, we're using some Rodico because I used too much. Now we can position the date wheel. It has to slip into place. I know you can see it right here because my fingers are inside, but I'm sorry. I tried in this video to use a bit more perspectives for the whole process. And have you seen? Instant date change. I was talking too much. I'm sorry. So now we're placing back this beautiful dial. I really like it that much. I know white dials are not every man's choice or everybody's choice. So I really like it. Just screw down the dial. And after screwing down the dial, we're gonna check the watch again. And as you can see, it's a day later and the amplitude already increased to 280. And this is something which is absolutely fine. I know Rolex says it has to be between 250 and 290. And this is exactly what we achieved. You know, I'm a hobbyist. I'm not nearly as good as somebody who's working at Rolex. There's no doubt about it. But if you know those numbers, you always try to achieve them. Of course, sometimes you don't succeed, and that's totally fine. But if you succeed, it's such a good feeling. And this hobby is always like failing once, trying to improve. And if you improve, it's so good. Really, I can't describe how much enjoyment this hobby creates. I highly recommend it to everyone watching this video. So now we're gonna position the hands, the minute hand and the second hand. And you can see the second hand is not running. This is because the crown is set to time changing. And if you're pushing the crown in, as I did, the second will immediately start to run. And now we're gonna see if the date changed at midnight. Okay, 2 minutes before midnight. I think that's okay. I always say from 5 minutes, if you're within a 5-minute range to midnight, it's absolutely fine. So the movement works, everything is fine. Now we're gonna have a look if we can give the watch case and the bracelet a little bit of love. First of all, which is pretty obvious, we need a new crystal. And to get the crystal off, you have to remove the bezel. I taped the sides of the case to get between case and bezel with the knife, which is pretty easy in this case, and you can easily remove the bezel. This is something which I was not aware of, because Rolex watches, especially on the outside, are so much easier to work on than cheap watches. This is a really huge difference. I always thought Rolex watches are so expensive, it's really hard to get them apart, especially in the case, but this is absolutely not. In my opinion, it's much easier to work on those cases than on other watches. But maybe I'm just not experienced enough for the other watches. And as you can see, there's a lot of dirt and grime, and this is not what I want to see. But yeah, if I have read the watchmaker marks on the back correctly, I think the last service was 20 or 25 years ago. And yeah, this is a lot of time for a lot of dirt, which can summarize on your case. So now we're gonna preparing everything for polishing. First of all, I'm taping the polished parts, and you also see the bracelet has this Rolex crown on it, and it still really looks good. So I decided to tape the crown, because on a lot of reworked bracelets, you can see that the crown is really small and polished down, as you would say. And by taping the crown, I don't remove dents at the crown, but it will stay sharp. And in my opinion, this is more important than a little dent at the bracelet, So this is just my personal preference. And it's my watch, and this is the good thing about this. If it's your own watch, you can decide what you want. And so I could simply decide it, and this was pretty good. I'm just polishing with different discs here. I have my little case holder, which I can put on my polishing machine, and then I'm just using this Scotch-Brite, holding it on the case and creating this kind of circular polishing. I'm using different Scotch-Brites here. This is just all a bit, experience based. I've done it quite a lot, or quite a few times now, and I know what surfaces I can create by that, and I like them, so I decided to do it like this. And yeah, you can see me the bracelet. I'm also doing the last polish by hand. This works really good for me, and I can control the brushing a bit more. Yeah. The case back also gets some kind of sandpaper treatment here. I know the case back does not look too good, but we're gonna give it an additional polishing later. And now you can see this crystal has some kind of magnet, some kind of area where you can read the date better. And there were a lot of scratches on that, so I decided to use Polywatch, and I was able to remove these scratches. And this was when I decided, okay, I can also treat the other parts of the crystal, as you can see here, but I have to use some special sanding paper here. I'm always going from coarse to fine, 320 to 600 to 1200, and I'm mostly using those wet sanding papers. And after the final sanding paper, 1200 it is here, and you see I'm only sanding those parts where the scratches are. When no scratches, I don't sand it. And as a last step, I'm using again Polywatch and polishing the whole crystal. And this is what the end result looks like. And yeah, there are nearly no dents. I mean, it's not like a totally new crystal, but I think it looks pretty good, and I can reuse it. And so we can get to the case back. I already created the structure on the middle of the case back. Now we just have to polish the high glance areas. And I'm just using this little polishing paste, this little polish. And I'm doing this by hand. And yeah, this is also, I'm just fast forwarding it because it took me quite a time. And afterwards, the results look like this. And yeah, I think that's good. Now we can clean everything, and you see everything looks pretty shiny now. I have also an ultrasonic cleaner for the case parts, for the bracelet and the case back and the crystal. This is some ultrasonic cleaner which I got from Amazon. I think it's not really expensive, but it works. Just putting it into the ultrasonic cleaner, give it 30 minutes of cleaning, and afterwards it looks like this. And this is, I must say, the results are really, really good. I'm really satisfied how this turned out, especially the golden bezel. It was not that easy to polish it, but it worked out. And now we can get back everything together. For placing the crystal, it's recommended to put the crown on and the stem in, so you can see how you have to position your crystal. And if the crystal is right, just put the bezel on top of it, and then using your crystal press or whatever press you have, and just pressing the bezel on top. I'm using this plastic sheet here to cover because gold is really soft, and I'm always a bit afraid of getting scratches into the gold bezel, but did not happen in this case, so I'm really happy. And now, before we are proceeding, one thing is always important. Water tightness, right? And as you can see, the gasket in the crown, yeah, how should I say? It's not in a good condition, so I decided to remove it, clean the crown. And after cleaning, it looks like this. That's good, I guess. And getting back a new gasket. This gasket is in the crown tube, and there are two other gaskets. One is in the tubus, or in this, you can see it here. This one looks good. I'm a bit surprised. The one is in such a bad condition. This is in a good condition, so I kept this one. I just re-lubed it and put it back in because it really looked nearly like new. So it's good, and we are fine. The last gasket is on the case back, and we will re-lube that too, but in a later stage. Now we're gonna assemble, or we're putting the movement and the dial and everything back into the case. Same procedure as removing it, just turning it into the right position. So the case back screws get into grooves, and then you can reposition it, putting back the crown back in, seeing if everything works, screwing it down. It's 3 turns for the crown. This is a good amount, so I don't have to use a new crown. So everything is fine, and we can get back to the automatic winds and the 2 reversing wheels, which I have epilamized and also relubed. I put some oil on the inner contacts of the reversing wheels. I just forgotten to film it, I'm sorry, but I put some oil on it. And placing the top of the automatic bridge here. So again, you have to align the pivots. Now they're in the right position. Always test it if everything turns freely. This is the case. And now we can get back our rotor onto the automatic bridge. It's pretty easy. It's just secured by this little clamp here. And on top of this, there is also a little gear, wheel, whatever. In watchmaking, gears are called wheels, so I think everything, both is correct. And now we're positioning the automatic bridge on top of the movement, or maybe it's not on top, it's more the back, but for me it's the top, you know. And just make sure everything aligns, which is the case here. Screwing down the automatic bridge and yeah, oiling the pivots. I've just filmed oiling one of the pivots, but I oiled all of the pivots. And now we can relube the gasket of the case back and putting it on the case back. I've used a new gasket in this case, by the way. Gaskets are not that expensive and they're important for water tightness. Just getting into the watch when the last service of this watch was. It was in January 25, as you can see here. I always think this is important for, I don't know who's the next watchmaker. I hope I will keep this watch. So it's possibly me. At least I hope. And now we're gonna put the case back on the case using our heavy gun. And we're nearly finished. Now we're gonna check if the watch is watertight. Therefore I have this little device here, which is creating a vacuum in this chamber. And if the watch is watertight, the crystal will deform in a positive way, which it does here. And after deforming, you have to wait for 5 minutes. And if the deformation does not change, the watch is watertight. In this case, this is totally the case. So this watch is 100% watertight, which is awesome for a 40-year-old watch. And now we can simply get back the bracelet onto the case. And I think I have my first Rolex, which I can wear. And I must say I'm pretty proud. I mean, don't get it wrong, but it's always a great feeling to wear a watch which you have serviced or restored by yourself. In this case, I hope you have enjoyed the video. One more last test. And here are some final videos.